Ancient Egypt built a wonder so immense it was said to dwarf the pyramids themselves. This is the story of the lost Labyrinth, a legendary complex of 3,000 rooms that vanished from the earth, leaving behind a mystery that has taunted historians and archaeologists for centuries. By the end of this journey, you will understand why this forgotten structure could be the key to unlocking the deepest secrets of a pharaoh's mind. We will follow the whispers of ancient travelers, examine a single, frustrating clue in the sand, and confront the shocking possibility that the entire labyrinth might still be buried, waiting to be found. What does it truly take for a civilization's greatest achievement to be erased from history? Herodotus stood before a structure that defied his understanding. In his writings from the 5th century before the Common Era, he called it a labyrinth, a word borrowed from the complex palace of myth, and declared it a sight more stupendous than the pyramids. He described 12 roofed courts with gates facing each other, 6 to the north and 6 to the south, all enclosed within one continuous wall. He spoke of 3,000 rooms, half underground and half above, a number so vast it feels less like a measurement and more like a metaphor for infinity. The halls and colonnades, he claimed, were so bewildering that no stranger could find their way through without a guide. His account is filled with genuine wonder, but it is also the report of a traveler collecting stories, a Greek historian trying to make sense of an ancient, alien grandeur. He tells us the labyrinth was built near a vast lake as a tomb for the sacred crocodiles by a king named Mens, whom we know as Amenemhat III. This is our starting point, a story told by a man who lived almost 2,000 years after the pyramids were built, describing something even older. Then, centuries later, another Greek geographer, Strabo, visited the same site. His description is more grounded, more architectural. He notes a great palace composed of many palaces, equal in number to the nomes or provinces of Egypt. He mentions large halls with winding passages that were difficult to navigate, but he does not echo the overwhelming scale of Herodotus. He saw a great structure in ruins, its roof made of stone, its walls covered with elaborate carvings. Each of these men walked the same dust, yet they handed down different visions. This is the fragile foundation of our search, texts written by outsiders marveling at a civilization's fading echo. Their words paint a picture of overwhelming scale and impossible complexity, a monument meant not just to impress but to disorient and humble. But were they describing a literal, bewildering maze, or was the labyrinth something else entirely? Perhaps it was a massive administrative and religious center, a stone embodiment of the Egyptian state, with each court representing a different nome and its local deity. Or maybe its winding passages were a physical map of the underworld, a place for ritual journeys meant to mirror the perilous path of the sun god through the darkness. The ancient testimonies give us a name and a legend, but they leave the true blueprint frustratingly out of reach. They created a ghost in the historical record, a monument of words so massive it threatens to crush the scant physical evidence beneath its weight. This disparity between the vivid stories and the silent sand sets our first and greatest challenge. If these classical writers were even partially correct, where on earth could such a colossus have stood, and how could it have simply disappeared? The search for a ghost requires a map, and our map leads to a place of water and life in the desert. The Fayyum oasis, a vast fertile depression fed by a branch of the Nile, was the royal heartland of Amenemhat III. At its edge, near the ancient shores of Lake Moeris, lies the site of Hawara, dominated by the pharaoh's mud-brick pyramid. This is the location where, for over a century, the weight of scholarly hope has settled. It was here that the legendary labyrinth was most likely built, not as a solitary maze in the sand, but as the pharaoh's monumental mortuary temple, a sprawling stone annex to his final resting place. Imagine this not as a barren tomb site, but as a thriving ceremonial landscape. The lake provided abundance, a symbol of regeneration, making this a place of both earthly power and spiritual passage. The pyramid was the anchor, but the temple was the stage for eternity. In the late 1880s, the renowned archaeologist Flinders Petrie arrived at Hawara, drawn by the classical accounts. What he discovered was both electrifying and deeply puzzling. He uncovered not towering walls or bewildering corridors, but a colossal foundation bed. It was a vast, level expanse of limestone chips and mortar, measuring roughly 1,000 feet by 800 feet, crisscrossed by the ghostly lines of foundation trenches. It was the footprint of something immense, the architectural echo of a structure that had been systematically dismantled. Petrie himself believed this was the base of the Labyrinth, a complex so large it essentially formed a stone city for the dead. The scale matched the legends, but the evidence was infuriatingly flat. Where were the 3,000 rooms? Where were the winding passages that so confounded Herodotus? The theory that emerged is compelling. This labyrinth was not a puzzle for the living, but a machine for the afterlife. It would have been a ritual complex of unparalleled size, perhaps containing chapels for every nome and deity of Egypt, ensuring the pharaoh's cosmic authority endured. Its labyrinthine design might have served a sacred purpose, a physical manifestation of the perilous journey through the underworld, a path only the righteous pharaoh, guided by ritual, could navigate. Yet the gap between Petrie's foundation and the vivid classical stories feels vast. Is this scatter of stone chips all that remains of a wonder said to surpass the pyramids? Or does this very frustration point to a different, more tantalizing possibility? Perhaps we are not looking at the ruins of the labyrinth, but merely its launching point. What if the true wonder, the heart of the mystery, does not lie above this foundation, but beneath it? Petrie's vast stone foundation was not a floor plan for confusion, but for cosmic order. The labyrinth's true purpose was far greater than any mere maze. It was a machine for eternity, built to secure a pharaoh's legacy in both this world and the next. At its heart, this complex served the cult of Amenemhat III, ensuring his spirit received offerings and prayers forever, but it was also a temple to Sobek, the powerful crocodile god of the Fayyum. This dual dedication reveals a brilliant political and spiritual fusion. By linking his own eternal worship to the region's principal deity, Amenemhat bound his identity to the very land and its divine protector. Now consider the staggering scale described by Herodotus. If the labyrinth truly contained halls or chapels for each of Egypt's provinces, the message becomes clear. This was not just a temple, it was a map of the kingdom carved in stone. Each space represented a nome with its local gods and resources, symbolically gathered under the pharaoh's watch. In life, he ruled from a capital, but in death, he would govern a miniature Egypt, a perfect stone universe ensuring the country's eternal unity and stability. This transforms the winding passages from puzzles into pathways. They likely recreated the sacred journey of the sun god Ra, who each night traveled through the 12 hours of darkness in the underworld, facing challenges before being reborn at dawn. Priests performing rituals would walk this symbolic path, navigating the corridors as a form of sacred theater, guiding the pharaoh's spirit through the same perilous renewal. The labyrinth, therefore, was a battery for the afterlife, a grand device to channel divine power and maintain the balance of the cosmos. Its rumored immensity makes perfect sense because it had to contain nothing less than the entire ordered world. To conceive of such a structure required a ruler of extraordinary vision and ambition. So who was the mind behind this monumental thought? Amenemhat III ruled for over 40 years, a span of time that allowed not just for building, but for dreaming on a colossal scale. His reign was the zenith of the Middle Kingdom, an era defined by order, confidence, and a profound belief in humanity's ability to shape the world. His greatest legacy was not carved in stone first, but in earth and water. He undertook a staggering feat of hydraulic engineering, overseeing the construction of massive canals, dikes, and a monumental water regulation system at the entrance to the Fayyum. This project did not just control the Nile's annual flood, it invited it in, transforming a seasonal marsh into a vast, permanent lake and thousands of acres of fertile farmland. He literally reshaped the landscape, turning a region into the granary of Egypt. This was a pharaoh who did not simply accept the gifts of nature, he commanded them. His power was measured in harvests and stability, so when it came time to prepare for his journey to the gods, his vision would be equally transformative. The same administrative genius that managed a kingdom's food supply would be applied to managing eternity. The labyrinth, then, emerges not as a sudden burst of vanity, but as the logical, ultimate project of a ruler whose entire career was about imposing lasting order on chaos. If he could regiment the flow of a river and the growth of crops, why not architect the very path his soul would take through the afterlife? His pyramid at Hawara was one anchor, but the labyrinth was the true engine. It was designed to be a perpetual state temple, a fixed point where the bureaucracy of the divine could forever administer his cult. Every chapel for every gnome, every winding corridor mirroring the underworld served a purpose. It centralized the spiritual geography of Egypt just as his waterworks centralized its physical bounty. This context makes the structure's reported scale completely coherent. For a king who controlled the lifeline of a nation, a funerary complex that contained a symbolic model of the entire nation was the only fitting monument. It was the final, definitive stamp of a ruler who spent a lifetime consolidating power. Yet this understanding deepens the central mystery. A symbol this potent, built by a king this powerful, does not just fade from memory by accident. Its erasure feels intentional. What could possibly threaten a legacy carved so deeply into both the land and the imagination of a civilization? The answer may lie not in a single act of destruction, but in a slow, grinding force far greater than any army. A wonder of granite and limestone does not simply vanish into thin air. Its disappearance is a slow, deliberate subtraction, a story written not in construction but in dismantling. The labyrinth's fate is the fate of countless ancient monuments, amplified to near total erasure by its own immense value. The very stones that proclaimed its glory became its undoing. For centuries after its sacred purpose faded, the site at Hawara presented an irresistible opportunity. Here lay a vast, pre-cut quarry of the finest quality stone, already shaped and ready for transport. Why mine new blocks from distant hills when a city's worth of pristine granite and limestone sat waiting, free for the taking? This was not an act of vandalism in the modern sense, but a practical, economic reality. From the Roman period through to the early Islamic era, builders seeking material for their own cities, temples, fortifications, and bridges would have looked upon the labyrinth not as a sacred wonder, but as a resource. Teams of workers, generation after generation, would have methodically pried loose the facing stones, toppled the colossal columns, and carted away the intricately carved wall fragments. They took the skin and skeleton of the building, leaving behind only what was useless to them, the vast foundation bed of crushed stone and mortar that Flinders Petrie would later uncover. This systematic recycling was a quiet, relentless process. It wasn't a single catastrophic event, but a slow consumption by time and utility. The landscape itself conspired in this vanishing act. The very canals that Amenemhat built to nourish the Fayyum gradually silted up over the centuries, altering the water flow and allowing the desert sands to creep back in. What was once a vibrant ceremonial complex on a lake shore slowly became a forgotten, buried field. the grand labyrinth was picked apart for its bones and then gently shrouded by the earth. This logical explanation, however, leaves a haunting emptiness. It feels too ordinary, too quiet for the demise of something so legendary. The completeness of the erasure is what fuels a persistent, tantalizing doubt. Could such thorough plunder really have left nothing behind? Not a single hidden chamber, not one lower course of wall still nestled in the sand below that foundation. This nagging question is what transforms the story from an archaeological footnote into an enduring mystery. It invites us to look past the obvious and consider what might still lie beneath the plain of stone chips, waiting for a signal, a clue, or a shift in the sand to reveal its final secret. The year was 1888, and the sands of Hawara met a man of relentless precision. Flinders Petrie, a pioneer of modern archaeology, arrived with the words of Herodotus and Strabo in his mind and a meticulous methodology in his practice. He was not there for treasure but for truth, to measure the ghost against the ground. His focus was the area surrounding the crumbling mud-brick pyramid of Amenemhat III, a landscape that appeared to be little more than a desolate plain. Patiently, his team began to clear and survey, peeling back the surface to read the story written in the earth itself. What they uncovered was both monumental and profoundly empty. It was not a wall, not a column, not a single carved relief. Instead, they revealed a colossal rectangular outline, a giant's fingerprint pressed into the soil. This was a foundation trench, an enormous bed measuring roughly 1,000 feet by 800 feet, filled with a uniform layer of crushed limestone and granite chips. This was the footprint. Petrie stood at the edge of this vast, flat expanse and saw immediately what it meant. This scatter of stone was the deliberate, level base upon which something unimaginably heavy had once rested. The scale was staggering, a man-made plateau fit for a legend. In his scientific assessment, this could only be the substructure of the labyrinthine temple, the very platform from which those 3,000 rooms had once ascended. For the first time, the myth had a map. The classical tales were no longer just travelers' yarns. They had a geographical anchor, a physical address in the desert. Yet this discovery, while confirming the monument's reality, deepened its mystery exponentially. Petrie had found the evidence, but the evidence was an absence. He had uncovered the negative space where the wonder had been. The trench was a silhouette, a confirmation that something colossal was missing. Where were the labyrinth's walls? Where were the ceilings, the statues, the winding passages? The foundation suggested they had been systematically stripped away, leaving only this ghostly impression in the earth. This paradox is what makes Petrie's work so pivotal. He provided the first scientific corroboration, transforming the labyrinth from pure fable into a historical problem. But in doing so, he framed it as an archaeological phantom, defined more by what was gone than by what remained. His great foundation trench is the closest thing we have to a smoking gun, but it is a gun that points only at a void. It solidified the site's importance while simultaneously announcing that the real prize, the structure itself, had vanished from the surface of the earth. This conclusion did not end the search, it merely changed its direction. If the labyrinth was not above this foundation, could parts of it still lie below? Petrie's trench, that immense and frustrating clue, set the stage for a new kind of quest, one that would require not just shovels, but technology capable of seeing through sand and time. The 20th century brought new eyes to the old dust. Archaeologists returned to the plain at Hawara armed not just with shovels, but with a growing array of scientific tools and a determination to solve the puzzle Petrie had outlined. Aerial photography, a revolutionary technique for the time, revealed the site from above, showing the stark geometry of the foundation bed and its relationship to the pyramid and ancient water channels. It was like seeing a ghost from a new angle, its shape clearer but its substance no less elusive. Expeditions from institutions like the University of Michigan, followed by dedicated Egyptian teams, conducted painstaking surveys. They meticulously mapped every dip and rise in the terrain, catalogued every pottery shard, and traced the outlines of smaller, subsidiary buildings that once clustered around the main complex. They confirmed with ever greater precision that this was indeed the site of a monument of staggering ambition. The data piled up, a mountain of measurements confirming a void. Yet for all their improved methods, the central mystery refused to yield. No grand staircase was unearthed, no archive of papyri, no hidden crypt with a map of the fabled 3,000 rooms. The teams found more of the foundation, more evidence of systematic stone robbing, and more silence where they hoped for inscription. The labyrinth, as a physical structure, remained stubbornly ephemeral, a monument defined entirely by its absence. This period of careful, thorough archaeology was crucial, yet deeply frustrating. It solidified Hawara's status as the correct location while simultaneously highlighting the limitations of traditional excavation. When a building has been so completely dismantled, when its very bones have been carted away over centuries, scraping at the surface can only tell you so much. You are left studying the empty socket after the tooth has been pulled. This growing body of negative evidence began to nurture a quiet, scholarly doubt. Had the classical authors, writing centuries after the fact, simply exaggerated a large but otherwise ordinary mortuary temple into a legend? Was Petrie's vast foundation bed just the base for a colossal but straightforward temple complex, one that later generations, in awe of its scale, transformed into the myth of the labyrinth? The 20th century work did not dispel the legend, but it did frame a haunting alternative. Perhaps the real wonder was not a literal maze, but the power of a story to grow in the telling, to become more real than the ruins that inspired it. This uncertainty set the stage for a fundamental shift. If the answers were no longer on the surface, the next logical step was to ask what secrets might still lie beneath it, hidden from the eyes of every explorer who had come before. A new kind of vision arrived with the 21st century, one that could see through sand and time. The quest to find the lost labyrinth moved beyond shovels and brushes into the realm of geophysical prospecting. These are non-invasive technologies, powerful tools that act like X-rays for the Earth itself. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses of energy into the ground and listens for the echoes that bounce back from buried structures. Electrical resistivity tomography measures how easily electricity flows through the soil, revealing where solid stone blocks its path. Magnetometry detects tiny variations in the magnetic field, pinpointing areas where ancient fires or human activity have left a lasting signature. Together, they create a detailed picture of what lies beneath the surface without ever breaking the ground. For a site like Hawara, where the surface seemed to tell a story of total erasure, this was nothing short of a revolution. It offered the chance to peer directly into the silence that had frustrated generations of archaeologists. The promise was to replace speculation with a scan, to give the ghost a skeleton. In 2008, that promise was put to the test. An international team known as the Mataha Expedition, working in cooperation with Egyptian authorities, brought these sophisticated instruments to the plain south of Amenemhat's pyramid. They methodically scanned the area, collecting terabytes of data from the seemingly blank expanse. When the results were processed, they sent a jolt of excitement through the world of Egyptology. The scans appeared to reveal something astonishing. Beneath several meters of sand and sediment, the data suggested the presence of a vast, grid-like structure. The patterns on the screen showed distinct lines and right angles, formations of high-density material that stood out starkly against the surrounding soil. It looked for all the world like the blueprint of a colossal building. Here, at last, was a digital ghost matching the scale of the ancient descriptions. The announcement was electrifying. Headlines around the globe declared that the lost labyrinth of Egypt had been found. The narrative was irresistible, the story of a high-tech discovery finally solving a 2,000-year-old mystery. It suggested that the labyrinth had not been completely quarried away after all. Instead, the most foundational parts of the complex, its lowest chambers and deepest walls, might have simply been abandoned and buried, sealed by centuries of wind-blown sand and silt from the nearby canals. This would mean the heart of the wonder was not destroyed, but preserved in a state of perfect archaeological sleep, waiting for the right moment to be awakened. The geophysical data transformed the site from a historical footnote back into a frontier of discovery. It replaced the frustrating void with a tantalizing, if pixelated, shape. Yet, as with all revolutionary tools, the scans did not provide a simple answer. They presented a new kind of riddle, written not in hieroglyphs, but in wavelengths and resistivity values. The beautiful, geometric images sparked as many questions as they seemed to resolve. Were these lines truly the walls of Amenemhat's labyrinth, or could they be the foundations of a later Roman settlement built with the labyrinth's stolen stones? Could the patterns reflect natural geological formations, like ancient riverbeds or layers of hardened sediment? The promise of a clear picture had, in fact, revealed a profound new layer of ambiguity, one where science and legend would now have to meet in careful, cautious interpretation. The beautiful lines on the screen were a riddle in a new language. While the world celebrated a high-tech discovery, a quieter, more rigorous conversation was unfolding within archaeology itself. The initial excitement over the 2008 scans quickly met a wall of professional skepticism. Experts who had spent decades studying the Fayyum landscape looked at the same data and saw not the walls of a labyrinth, but other, more mundane possibilities. The grid-like patterns, they suggested, could be the ghost of a large Roman town or agricultural estate, built centuries after Amenemhat using the very stones plundered from his temple. They might also align with the foundations of a later Islamic cemetery, or even reflect natural geological features like ancient, hardened river channels cutting through the sediment. Each of these alternatives was a plausible, if less romantic, explanation for the anomalies beneath the sand. The debate grew more intense because the Minotaur expedition's full data set was not published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, the standard process for vetting such claims. This lack of transparent methodology led to accusations of sensationalism, of letting a compelling narrative outrun the evidence. The controversy laid bare a fundamental tension in modern exploration. Our tools have become incredibly powerful, capable of revealing shapes hidden for millennia, but those shapes are silent. They do not come with labels. A radar echo cannot tell you if it is bouncing off a pharaoh's wall or a Roman sewer. This transforms the archaeologist's role from a discoverer into an interpreter, a translator of ghosts. The scans did not solve the mystery, they upgraded it. They replaced an empty space with a provocative, pixelated question mark. The labyrinth was no longer just a story from Herodotus or a foundation from Petrie. It was now a digital legend, a myth rendered in data points. This created a new kind of limbo. We have a tantalizing hint, a high-tech whisper from the underworld, but we lack the one thing that can turn a whisper into a shout, physical proof. The current frontier of this ancient mystery is a standoff between hope and skepticism, between the thrilling potential of technology and the slow, meticulous discipline of the trowel. It is a high-stakes waiting game where the next logical step is also the most difficult, the most expensive, and the most final, a full-scale excavation to reach down and touch those mysterious lines. Until that happens, the scans remain a modern chapter in an ancient story, a reminder that sometimes the better our tools for seeing the past become, the more carefully we must learn to look. The story of the labyrinth did not end at the edge of the desert. When a physical monument vanishes, its idea can travel, finding new homes in the art and architecture of distant cultures. If the stones at Hawara are silent, we might listen for echoes elsewhere. one of the most powerful reverberations appears over 1,000 kilometers away on the island of Crete. Here, the Bronze Age Minoans built the vast palace of Knossos, a complex so sprawling and intricate that later Greek myth wove it into the tale of the Minotaur, a creature trapped at the heart of a maze built by the inventor Daedalus. The connection is tantalizing. The Egyptian labyrinth was a mortuary temple, the Minoan complex a living palace, yet both were described with the same word and shared the same symbolic core, a winding, confusing path leading to a central, sacred space. Scholars debate fiercely whether this represents a direct cultural exchange across the Mediterranean or simply a shared human archetype, a universal way to represent the difficult journey of ritual, initiation, or confronting power. Whether through trade, story, or parallel imagination, the motif of the labyrinth as a place of awe and trial had taken root far from the banks of the Nile. Centuries rolled on, and the symbol found new life under the Romans. As their empire stretched from Britain to Syria, wealthy citizens adorned their villa floors with intricate mosaic puzzles. These were not mere decorations, they were deliberate statements. Many of these mosaics depict the classic spiraling labyrinth pattern, and some are even boldly labeled with the word labyrinthus. Often at the center of the design, you find an image of the Minotaur, a clear nod to the Cretan myth. But the ultimate source of the awe, the original wonder that gave the concept its legendary weight, may well have been the long-lost Egyptian complex. Roman scholars and travelers like Pliny the Elder wrote about the Egyptian labyrinth with reverence, ensuring its fame endured even as its physical form was dismantled to build Roman towns. The mosaic on a floor in Pompeii or a villa in Gaul was not just a geometric game. It was a reference to a known wonder of the world, a symbol of impenetrable complexity and legendary scale that any educated Roman would recognize. These artistic echoes, from the bull courts of Knossos to the tiled floors of a Roman governor's home, tell us something profound. They demonstrate that the true power of Amenemhat's monument transcended its granite blocks. Long before it was a ruin, it became an idea, and ideas are remarkably portable. The labyrinth evolved from a specific Egyptian temple complex into a universal symbol for any journey that is confusing, perilous, and transformative. It represented the winding path of the soul through the afterlife, the complex bureaucracy of a state, the puzzle of fate itself. This cultural diffusion underscores a poignant truth: the story of the labyrinth proved more durable than its stones. Even as teams of laborers were quarrying its walls for practical reuse, the legend of those walls was being cemented into the imagination of the ancient world, ensuring that the pharaoh's dream of eternal remembrance would, in a way he never could have predicted, ultimately come true. To truly grasp the labyrinth, we must walk its corridors not as archaeologists but as priests. This was not a monument for the living to admire from a distance. It was a sacred engine, a portal between worlds. At its core, the labyrinth served a dual divine purpose, housing the cult of the crocodile god Sobek, the fierce lord of the Fayyum waters, and the worship of the deified Amenemhat III himself. In the Egyptian worldview, a pharaoh did not simply pass on. He underwent a transformation, merging with the gods to become an eternal force for cosmic balance, or Mat. The labyrinth was the machine built to power that transformation in perpetuity. Imagine teams of priests moving through its halls in a precise, daily choreography. In specific offering chambers, they would present food, incense, and recite spells, not to a memory, but to the active, living spirit or ka of the king. This was spiritual maintenance, a ritual refueling to keep the pharaoh's divine influence flowing into the world, ensuring the Nile would flood, the harvests would be abundant, and chaos would be held at bay. The temple was a battery, and these ceremonies were the charge it held, but the design suggests an even deeper layer of sacred theater. The most compelling interpretation of its winding, confusing layout is that it physically mapped the sun god Ra's harrowing nightly journey. Ancient texts describe Ra traveling through the 12 perilous hours of the underworld in a solar bark, facing monstrous challenges in the darkness before being triumphantly reborn at dawn. The labyrinth's many corridors and chambers could have been a ritual landscape where priests reenacted this voyage, symbolically guiding the pharaoh's soul through each hour, overcoming obstacles and emerging victorious into the light. This means every hypothetical turning, every dead end, every sudden opening into a grand hall was not an architectural accident. It was a theological statement carved in stone. A corridor might represent the narrow, dangerous passage of the fourth hour. A large chamber could be the fiery lake of the seventh. The labyrinth was a three-dimensional guidebook to the afterlife, a perilous but necessary path that the king's spirit had to master to achieve eternal rebirth. This profound religious function casts the later classical stories in a new light. When Greek travelers like Herodotus heard tales of a bewildering complex from which no stranger could find their way out, they were hearing a distant echo of a sacred truth. The labyrinth was designed to be spiritually impenetrable to the uninitiated, a protected path meant only for the righteous king and the priests who served him. The fear and awe it inspired in outsiders were not misunderstandings, but a dim reflection of its original, terrifying purpose, to chart the ultimate journey from which only a god could return. To search for its true blueprint, then, is to search for more than a building plan. It is an attempt to recover a lost scripture written not on papyrus, but in the very alignment of walls and gates, a silent hymn to regeneration that turned stone into a pathway for the divine. But a machine of the gods also required a bureaucracy of men. Beyond the winding corridors of ritual, another compelling vision of the labyrinth emerges, one grounded not in the mysteries of the afterlife, but in the practical demands of a flourishing kingdom. Ancient historian Manetho, an Egyptian priest writing for a Greek audience, offered a striking alternative, suggesting the complex was built as a royal palace. This secular theory transforms those legendary 3,000 rooms from chapels of the underworld into something equally monumental: offices, granaries, workshops, and quarters for the vast administrative machine that governed Amenemhat III's realm. Consider the setting. The Fayyum was not just a spiritual center, it was the crown jewel of the pharaoh's economic reforms, a reclaimed breadbasket producing immense wealth. Where better to place the beating heart of regional governance than at the very source of that wealth? In this view, the labyrinth becomes a colossal administrative archive and economic hub. Imagine scribes in sunlit chambers meticulously recording the yield of the harvest on papyrus scrolls, tallying taxes paid in grain, and managing the distribution of labor for the kingdom's next great project. Envision governors and officials from across the provinces holding court in its halls, their authority magnified by the overwhelming scale of the pharaoh's own complex. The statue of Amenemhat, present in both temple and administrative wing, would serve as a constant stone reminder that every bushel counted and every decision made was under the watch of a king who was now a god. This duality of purpose makes the structure uniquely fascinating. It was likely both a temple for eternity and a capital for the here and now. The spiritual and the logistical were not separate spheres in ancient Egypt. They were threads woven into the same fabric of power. The labyrinth, then, becomes a true microcosm of the kingdom itself, a stone model where the divine authority that justified rule sat side by side with the practical offices that exercised it. Such a multifaceted role, combining the functions of a holy site, a royal residence, and a governmental capital, would absolutely justify a construction project said to rival and even surpass the pyramids, which served a singular funerary purpose. This practical theory forces us to shift our gaze from the priests in the shadows to the countless unseen hands that made such a place possible. It leads us to wonder not just about the spiritual vision, but about the immense human effort, the staggering logistics, and the organized labor required to bring a microcosm of an entire civilization from dream into stone. The sheer weight of the legend begins to strain the laws of physics. To contemplate the labyrinth's construction is to confront a logistical puzzle that rivals the engineering of the pyramids themselves. Herodotus spoke of 3,000 rooms, a number that may be symbolic, but even a fraction of that scale represents a mountain of stone moved across a kingdom. We are in the Middle Kingdom, around 1800 years before the Common Era, an age of sophisticated organization, but one without iron tools, without pulleys, without the wheel for heavy transport. Every ton of granite and limestone had to be coaxed from the earth with copper chisels and dolerite pounders, loaded onto wooden sledges, and dragged by teams of men across wetted clay paths to the shores of Lake Moeris. The soundscape of this decades-long project would have been a deafening chorus, the rhythmic pounding of stone hammers, the groaning of massive timbers under strain, the shouted chants of hundreds of laborers heaving on ropes, all under the relentless Egyptian sun. This was not the work of a mythical enslaved populace, but of a state mobilized for a sacred national project. Conscripted farmers, working in rotating crews during the Nile's inundation when fields were flooded, formed the backbone of the labor force. They were fed with rations of bread and beer, housed in vast temporary barrack cities that sprang up near the site, their efforts coordinated with a military-like precision that speaks to a bureaucracy of astonishing capability. Master architects and surveyors worked with simple but brilliant tools, sighting along water-filled trenches to create perfectly level foundations over acres of land, using ropes knotted at precise intervals to maintain right angles across distances that would have dwarfed any building they had ever attempted. The financial drain would have been colossal, consuming the surplus of the entire kingdom, a river of grain, oil, linen, and copper flowing into this single, audacious endeavor. That Amenemhat III could command such a sustained effort for what was likely the entirety of his long reign is the ultimate testament to his authority. It proves his kingdom was not just stable, but overflowing with the confidence and resources to attempt the impossible. The labyrinth was not merely built, it was an act of national will, a civilization flexing its collective muscle to create a monument to its own divine order. Yet this understanding casts the monument's disappearance in an even more tragic light. All that staggering human effort, all those lifetimes of toil, all that meticulously organized ambition, resulted in a structure that later generations would see not as a sacred wonder, but as a convenient quarry. The stones that took generations to move and shape were hauled away over centuries to build other things, leaving behind only a memory and a field of chips. This raises a haunting question that echoes far beyond the Egyptian desert. What does it truly mean for a legacy to endure? Is it found in the permanence of stone, or in the persistence of a story that refuses to be buried? Even as its stones were hauled away to build other cities, the legend of the labyrinth refused to be dismantled. Its story proved more portable than its granite blocks, traveling through time on the pages of manuscripts and the edges of maps. In the medieval world, where geography blended with myth, cartographers faced vast blank spaces on their parchments. Into these unknown regions, they often inscribed marvels and monsters drawn from ancient texts. On some of these maps in the land of Egypt, you might find a single captivating word, labyrinth. It sat there not as a verified location, but as a phantom landmark, a testament to the enduring power of classical stories over contemporary knowledge. It was a place of the mind, drawn from the tales of Herodotus and Pliny, stubbornly persisting in the human imagination long after its physical coordinates had been forgotten. This cartographic ghost ensured the labyrinth remained a fixture of the wondrous world, a destination for the armchair explorer. In popular lists of the world's great wonders, compiled and recopied through the ages, the labyrinth often appeared. Sometimes it stood in for the Lighthouse of Alexandria on lists that capped the marvels at 7. Other times it was mentioned in a breath alongside the pyramids, a mysterious eighth wonder that challenged the very definition of the list. It became the placeholder for an unsolved mystery, a symbol that some achievements of the past were so grand they could vanish from the earth yet never fade from memory. The symbol itself began to transform, taking on new and profound meanings. In the secretive manuscripts of alchemists and esoteric thinkers, the labyrinth was adopted as a perfect emblem for their spiritual quest. Its winding, confusing path with a single, hard-won center mirrored the arduous journey toward enlightenment or the discovery of the philosopher's stone. The seeker had to navigate dead ends of error and temptation, persevering through confusion to reach a transformative truth at the heart. In this context, the Egyptian labyrinth was no longer just a building. It was a blueprint for the human soul's most difficult journey. This evolution from a specific ruin to a universal metaphor is the labyrinth's true, unconquerable legacy. Its name became shorthand for any complex, inscrutable challenge, from the twists of fate to the puzzles of science. A labyrinth could be a difficult legal case, a tangled bureaucracy, or the mysterious workings of the human heart. By escaping its stone confines, the idea achieved a kind of immortality that Amenemhat III could never have foreseen. It ensured that long after the last block was taken from Hawara, the word and the awe it carried would never be truly lost. This centuries-long journey through legend, from Greek historian to medieval mapmaker to alchemist symbol, brings the story full circle, back to the modern desert and the sands that may still be hiding their secret. The digital age has given the ancient labyrinth a vibrant new afterlife. In sprawling video game worlds, players navigate trap-laden corridors beneath the Egyptian sand, solving puzzles and battling guardians to claim mythical artifacts. Blockbuster films depict it as a perilous dungeon-hiding world-altering secrets, while novels weave its endless passages into tales of adventure and esoteric discovery. This modern reimagining is a testament to the symbol's raw power, even if the on-screen version bears little resemblance to Amenemhat's administrative and religious center. The pop culture labyrinth is rarely a place of quiet ritual or grain taxation. It is an engine of spectacle, a stage for the individual hero to conquer chaos. Yet by consistently casting it as a container for ultimate mysteries, these stories fulfill a timeless human impulse. They keep the name alive, whispering to new generations that somewhere, buried in history, is a puzzle of epic scale waiting to be solved. This allure inevitably spills over into more speculative territories. The very emptiness at Hawara, the gap between grand legend and scant evidence, creates a vacuum that alternative narratives eagerly fill. In some circles, the labyrinth is recast as proof of a lost, advanced civilization, its precise stonework attributed to unimaginable ancient technology or even extraterrestrial guidance. More conspiratorial threads suggest its true purpose perhaps as a repository of forbidden knowledge about human origins or cosmic truths has been uncovered and deliberately suppressed by institutions guarding the status quo. While these theories exist firmly outside academic archaeology, they are culturally significant. They represent a profound and very human longing for the past to be more mysterious, more grand than the official record often allows. They desire the labyrinth not as a monument to a pharaoh's ego, but as a key to a hidden door in history itself. This cultural baggage now forms an invisible layer over the sand at Hawara. Any future announcement from the site, whether a new scan or a fragment of wall, will be received by a world primed by two competing visions. The scholarly community will evaluate it through a lens of peer review, stratigraphy, and comparative analysis. The broader public, however, will view it through a filter shaped by a century of cinema, gaming, and speculative lore. The potential for misunderstanding is immense, where the discovery of a mundane storage chamber could be sensationalized as the antechamber to a lost hall of records. Navigating this modern landscape requires its own kind of map, one that respects the powerful human need for wonder while steadfastly following the slower, less dramatic path of evidence. The real excavation ahead may be as much about carefully interpreting what we hope to find as it is about uncovering what actually lies beneath the stone chips and sand. Yet the sands of Hawara do not hold a monopoly on the mystery. While the Foundation Trench and the Pyramid of Amenemhat III present the most compelling case, a persistent whisper in Egyptology suggests we may be looking in the wrong place entirely. A minority of researchers have long proposed alternative locations, reminding us that a story 2,000 years in the telling is not easily pinned to a single map coordinate. One such candidate lies at El Lahan, near the Pyramid of Senusret II, Amenemhat's predecessor. This site also features a vast, meticulously planned settlement for priests and officials, a complex of streets and uniform houses that represents a different kind of ordered maze, one built for the living. Could later travelers, hearing tales of this immense administrative town, have conflated it with the mortuary temple of the next great king? Others look to the wider Fayyum region, suggesting the true labyrinth now lies buried not under desert sand, but beneath centuries of rich, modern cultivation, its stones plowed under by farmers unaware of the wonder beneath their fields. There is an even more radical interpretation that the labyrinth was never a single, unique structure at all. Perhaps it was a purely mythical construct, a composite memory forged from the awe Greek visitors felt when confronted by any of Egypt's colossal temple complexes. The hypostyle halls of Karnak with their forests of towering columns, or the sprawling precinct of the Ramesseum, could have collectively inspired the legend of a single, impossible maze. This theory proposes that labyrinth was simply a foreigner's term for any Egyptian building whose scale and complexity defied easy comprehension. Evaluating these alternatives is not an exercise in frustration, but a necessary dose of healthy skepticism. It prevents us from becoming too hypnotized by a single narrative, no matter how logically it unfolds from Petrie's trench. The human mind, especially when recounting travels across vast distances and centuries, has a tendency to consolidate and amplify. What if the original wonder was a grand but otherwise typical mortuary temple, whose story grew with each retelling, absorbing elements of other great sites until it became a legend unto itself? This expansion of possibility, while it complicates the quest for a physical blueprint, profoundly enriches the historical discussion. It transforms the labyrinth from a simple archaeological treasure hunt into a fascinating study of how cultural memory works, how stories evolve, and how ancient achievements are processed by later civilizations. It keeps the door open for genuine surprise, for the chance that a future discovery in an unexpected corner of Egypt could rewrite the entire tale. Yet, regardless of its precise latitude and longitude, the labyrinth's impact was utterly real. Its influence seeped into the art and architecture of distant cultures, proving that some ideas are so powerful they can travel perfectly intact, even when their point of origin is lost to the very earth. The labyrinth pattern is a whisper from the deepest parts of the human mind, found etched into stone long before Amenemhat ever drew a plan. To see the Egyptian wonder in its full light, we must recognize it as part of a chorus, not a solo. From the ancient rock carvings in Val Camonica, Italy, where spirals and maze-like designs dance across the cliffs, to the sacred symbol of the Hopi people, representing the Mother Earth and the journey of life, this form emerges independently across the globe. It appears in Celtic knots, in the floor patterns of medieval cathedrals, and in the myths of cultures that never traded stone or stories with the Nile. This cannot be coincidence. It points to something profound, a shared archetype buried in our collective consciousness. The labyrinth, in all its iterations, seems to be humanity's chosen shape for representing the most fundamental journeys, the winding path of a life with its unexpected turns and dead ends, the perilous voyage of the soul after death, or the inward quest to find one's own center. It is a map for confusion that promises, if one persists, a way through. The Egyptian labyrinth, then, may be the ultimate physical manifestation of this universal symbol. Where a shaman might draw a spiral in the sand or a tribe might dance a maze pattern, the pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom, with the boundless resources of a superpower, had the means to build that metaphor at a staggering, literal scale. They translated a fragile human idea into the immortal language of granite and limestone, attempting to make permanent what other cultures could only trace or imagine. This global context transforms our understanding. The lost labyrinth of Hawara is no longer just an Egyptian mystery. It is a monumental chapter in a worldwide story of human expression. It represents a peak moment when an entire civilization pooled its might to architect a spiritual concept that dwells within us all. Recognizing this makes its disappearance resonate on a deeper, more poignant frequency. We have not merely lost a pharaoh's temple, we have lost one of the most ambitious attempts to build a shared human dream in stone. This realization brings a certain weight as we return our gaze to the modern Egyptian desert. The search is no longer just for ruins, but for a cornerstone in the architectural history of the human imagination itself, which makes the practical challenges of finding it today all the more formidable. The final wall to navigate may not be made of stone, but of water and policy. To reach the tantalizing shapes suggested by scans, any excavation at Hawara must first solve a modern engineering crisis. The Fayyum's water table is perilously high, a legacy of the very irrigation systems Amenemhat III pioneered. Digging more than a few meters down would mean striking water, instantly flooding any trench and turning an archaeological site into a muddy pond. This isn't a minor obstacle, it is a fundamental blockade. Continuous industrial-scale pumping would be required just to keep a pit dry, an operation that is astronomically expensive, environmentally disruptive, and carries its own severe risk. The constant removal of groundwater could destabilize the very soil around the excavation, potentially causing ancient walls, preserved for millennia in a wet, stable environment, to crack, shift, or collapse under their own weight. The act of seeking the labyrinth could inadvertently destroy the fragile remains it seeks to find. Beyond the water lies a second layer of complexity, the careful stewardship of a living heritage. The site is governed by Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, an institution tasked with a monumental balancing act. Their mandate is to protect the nation's past while permitting its responsible study. Any proposal to dig at Hawara is not just a scientific application, it is a request to alter a protected landscape forever. The Council must weigh the potential knowledge gained against the absolute certainty of impact, considering the proximity to Amenemhat's pyramid and other monuments. This is not obstruction, it is profound responsibility. Furthermore, a project of this potential scale and technical nightmare would demand a level of funding and sustained international cooperation rarely seen in modern archaeology. It would require a consortium of universities, perhaps even private partners, committing resources for what could be a decade-long campaign with no guarantee of a headline-making discovery. The financial and diplomatic labyrinth is as intricate as the mythical one. These intersecting challenges have created a decades-long impasse. The technology to see the ghost has advanced light years, but the practical means to reach out and touch it remain mired in the mud of reality. This means the greatest discovery in Egyptian archaeology in a century could be sitting just a few meters below the surface, protected not by a pharaoh's curse, but by a much more powerful force, the immense and sobering cost of uncovering it responsibly. The water and the red tape form only the outer walls of a much deeper challenge. Suppose we could overcome the engineering and secure the permissions. Suppose the drills could turn and the pumps could hum. We would then face a profound and quiet question that has nothing to do with capability and everything to do with conscience. If the labyrinth is truly down there, preserved in its dark, wet tomb, do we have the right to bring it into the light? Full-scale excavation is an inherently destructive act. The very air we breathe carries unseen threats. Delicate pigments on a wall painting, untouched for nearly 4,000 years, can fade and flake away in a matter of months when exposed to modern atmosphere. Inscriptions on fragile wood or papyrus could crumble. Even the stone itself, stabilized by a consistent, waterlogged environment, can begin to deteriorate when that environment is abruptly changed. We could answer every historical question we have, only to watch the answers physically disintegrate before our eyes. The desire to know battles directly against the duty to preserve. This tension has spurred a quiet revolution in how we explore. Today, the goal is shifting from excavation to examination. Imagine a slender surgical probe, no wider than a coin, being guided down through the sediments. It could retrieve a tiny core sample, a thread of history containing microscopic pollen, fragments of plaster, or traces of metal, telling us about the environment and materials inside without ever opening a chamber. Robotic crawlers equipped with lights and high-definition cameras could navigate flooded passages, beaming back a live feed from a world meant to be sealed forever. Three-dimensional mapping from such devices could construct a perfect, walkable digital twin, allowing anyone in the world to explore the labyrinth virtually, while leaving the physical reality undisturbed in its protective sleep. This non-invasive approach offers a compelling middle path, a way to satisfy our curiosity while honoring the sanctity of the site. Yet, even this careful probing raises a philosophical objection. Some voices within archaeology and the broader public argue that the mystery itself holds immense value. The enduring enigma of the labyrinth has fueled over a century of scholarship, inspired art and literature, and drawn countless minds to ponder ancient Egypt. Solving it completely might, in a strange way, diminish its power. Furthermore, we must consider the intentions of the builders. Amenemhat III did not construct this eternal machine for tourists or archaeologists. He built it as a sealed, sacred instrument for his journey to the gods. By choosing to leave it buried, are we not, in a sense, finally respecting the pharaoh's ultimate wish for a perpetual, undisturbed house? This debate places us at a modern crossroads, one that echoes far beyond the sands of Hawara. It touches every site where wonder lies hidden. Do we prioritize our human drive to see and to know, or do we exercise a humble stewardship, accepting that some chapters of the human story are meant to remain closed, their secrets intact for the ages? The labyrinth, whether we ever breach its walls or not, has already given us a priceless gift. It has forced us to confront what discovery truly means, reminding us that the greatest responsibility often lies not in the triumphant unveiling, but in the wisdom to sometimes simply let the past rest. The tools we use to search for lost worlds are themselves evolving at a breathtaking pace. While ground-penetrating radar gave us our first tantalizing glimpse of what lies beneath, the next wave of discovery may come from far above, from the silent watch of satellites in orbit. Imagine these platforms equipped with sensors so precise they can detect variations in soil moisture, temperature, and even the minute gravitational pull of buried structures. They could scan the entire Fayyum basin, not just the known site at Hawara, creating a comprehensive map of every hidden anomaly across hundreds of square miles. From lower altitudes, aircraft mounted with LiDAR technology could fire millions of laser pulses at the ground, stripping away the visual noise of modern vegetation and surface debris to reveal the pure, ancient topography beneath. This data would show the ghostly imprint of long-filled canals, the foundations of forgotten settlements, and perhaps the geometric shadow of something far grander. But the true revolution lies not just in collecting this ocean of data, but in understanding it. This is where artificial intelligence enters the labyrinth. Sophisticated algorithms trained on thousands of known archaeological sites can be set loose on these new scans. Their purpose is to recognize patterns invisible to the human eye, to distinguish between a natural limestone layer and the straight line of a pharaoh's wall, to identify the subtle signature of a filled-in foundation trench amid centuries of sediment. An AI does not get tired, it does not have preconceptions, it simply processes, offering a cold, logical analysis of the ground's deepest secrets. This fusion of satellite eyes and machine minds could theoretically reanalyze the entire region, flagging locations for a closer look that previous generations of archaeologists might have walked right over. It promises a shift from targeted guessing to informed, data-driven discovery. Yet, even with a perfect digital map, the human element remains irreplaceable. The future likely belongs to large-scale, international collaborations, consortia of universities and research institutes that can pool funding, share cutting-edge technology, and navigate the complex permissions required for a multi-year project. Such a venture would be multidisciplinary from the start, bringing together geophysicists, hydrologists, data scientists, and Egyptologists in a single, coordinated effort. Their strategy would be surgical, using the high-tech scans to identify a few perfect locations for minimal, targeted excavation, perhaps using cofferdams and constant pumping to manage the water table in a very small, controlled area. The ultimate goal is profoundly ambitious, a complete, non-invasive digital reconstruction. Before ever breaking ground, we could have a fully rendered, three-dimensional model of the entire site as it existed in its prime. You could put on a virtual reality headset and walk the polished stone corridors, stand in the central courtyard, and look up at columns towering into a digitally recreated sky. This virtual labyrinth would allow scholars to study its layout and rituals in immersive detail, and let the public experience a wonder of the world thought lost forever. It is a future where we might finally hold a clear map of the myth, answering questions that have lingered for millennia. This relentless, technologically supercharged quest is about more than just finding stones. It is a direct line connecting our modern curiosity to the awe that struck Herodotus when he first heard the tales. It is proof that our drive to understand the grand puzzles of our past is a timeless, defining part of the human story, one that ensures no legend, no matter how deeply buried, is ever truly forgotten. That potential for a virtual resurrection speaks to a deeper, more human longing. Conclusively finding the labyrinth would be a seismic event, a discovery that resonates far beyond academic journals. For the field of Egyptology, it would represent the triumphant end of a search that began with Herodotus, a physical key finally fitting a lock forged by ancient words. Every textbook on the Middle Kingdom would need a new chapter, one grounded not in speculation, but in the precise measurements of its halls. We would see, for the first time, how ritual and bureaucracy were literally architected together, providing an unparalleled blueprint of a pharaoh's mind and his vision for eternal order. The validation of those classical accounts would be profound, a reminder that even the tallest tales often have a kernel of truth waiting to be unearthed. For the world, the discovery would instantly become a new cultural touchstone, a modern wonder born from ancient dust. The narrative is irresistibly powerful, a story of a colossus lost, sought, and miraculously found. It would capture the global imagination in a way few archaeological finds ever do, because it is not just an artifact, but a legendary place stepping fully formed from the mists of history. People would marvel not only at its scale, but at the journey of the search itself, a centuries-long detective story reaching its climax. It would stand as a permanent symbol of resilience, a testament to the idea that no achievement, no matter how buried by time or sand, is ever truly erased. On a personal level, for anyone who has ever been captivated by a mystery, the discovery would offer a rare and satisfying closure. That quiet curiosity that draws us to ancient riddles, the tickle of wondering what truly lay in those 3,000 rooms, would finally be settled. There is a shared human thrill in witnessing a puzzle solved, in seeing the blurred picture snap into perfect focus. It would be a gift of understanding passed to all future generations, ensuring that the next child who reads of the labyrinth does so with a clear image in mind, not a question mark. Ultimately, that moment of discovery would echo with a quiet, powerful truth. It would remind us that the past is not a silent, closed book. It is a conversation, and sometimes, if we listen carefully and search patiently, the earth itself chooses to answer. The relentless pursuit of the labyrinth, fueled by this profound potential reward, is a beacon in the desert. It is proof that our desire to connect with those who came before us is one of the most enduring and noble parts of our humanity. Herodotus placed the labyrinth above the pyramids, a judgment that demands a closer look. The pyramids of Giza are masterpieces of vertical ambition, their clean lines and singular purpose aimed at the celestial realm. They are mountains built by men, designed to project power outward and upward for all eternity. Their genius lies in that breathtaking simplicity of form, a geometric perfection meant to be witnessed, a statement on the horizon. The labyrinth proposed something entirely different. Its wonder was not in a singular peak, but in an endless horizon contained within walls. Where a pyramid soars, the labyrinth sprawled. Its power was not in a silhouette against the sky, but in the crafted experience within. Imagine the contrast. You stand before the Great Pyramid, and your eye is drawn irresistibly upward, following its faces to a vanishing point in the heavens. You then step into the labyrinth, and your world contracts into a universe of choices. Your gaze is pulled not up, but forward, down colonnaded avenues, through shadowed porticos, into sunlit courts and dim, winding passages. The amazement shifts from awe at a singular object to immersion in a boundless interior. For a traveler like Herodotus, steeped in a culture that prized the columned halls of Greek temples, this would have been a revelation of a different order. The pyramids were majestic but ultimately external. The labyrinth was an environment you entered, a world you navigated, a stone narrative you experienced with your own feet. Its reported 3,000 rooms speak not to height but to density, to a staggering variety of spaces, each serving a unique sacred or administrative function. This was not a monument to reach the gods, but a machine to house their bureaucracy and enact their rituals. The comparison reveals a profound shift in royal ideology across the ages. The Old Kingdom pharaohs of the Pyramid Age focused on a direct, vertical ascent to join the circumpolar stars. The Middle Kingdom, under rulers like Amenemhat III, seemed to focus on governing a perfected model of the cosmos itself from within. His labyrinth was a microcosm, a controlled universe where every province, every deity, and every ritual had its designated place. Its greatness, therefore, was measured in complexity, in intricate order, in the embodiment of an entire system. To say it surpassed the pyramids is not to diminish those timeless giants, but to recognize a different pinnacle of ambition. One reached for the sky, the other sought to contain the world. The labyrinth's grandeur was not carved from desert rock alone, but from the very lifeblood of Egypt. Its location in the Fayyum was no accident of royal whimsy. It was a deliberate act of hydrological ambition. The entire region was a gift of the Nile, specifically engineered by the pharaoh's own administration. The key was the Bar Yosef Canal, a natural branch of the great river that was meticulously widened, deepened, and controlled with a system of dikes and regulators. This was not mere irrigation, it was landscape-scale architecture. By managing the annual floodwaters, Amenemhat's engineers transformed a seasonal marsh into the vast, permanent Lake Moeris, and thousands of acres of incredibly fertile black soil. This created an economic powerhouse, a royal breadbasket whose surplus grain could feed the legions of laborers and priests required for a decades-long project. The labyrinth did not rise in spite of the environment. It rose because of a complete mastery over it. Picture the complex at its peak, not isolated in barren sand, but standing proudly near the shimmering edge of the Great Lake. Its polished limestone walls would have cast perfect reflections upon the water, doubling its majesty and visually tying the Pharaoh's stone universe to the source of all life. It is easy to imagine courtyards with tranquil pools, or shrines where water rituals honored Sobek, the crocodile god of the Fayyum waters, and celebrated the annual inundation that renewed the land. The labyrinth was, in a very real sense, a monument to the controlled Nile itself, a celebration of the hydraulic genius that made its construction possible. This profound connection to water also hints at the cause of its downfall. Civilizations rise and fall with their infrastructure. Over centuries, as central authority waned, the meticulous maintenance of the canal system likely faltered. Silt gradually choked the waterways, the lake's boundaries may have shrunk or shifted, and the economic heart of the region slowly weakened. As the Fayyum's prosperity faded, so too did the need to maintain its grandest temple. The labyrinth, once the vibrant center of a managed paradise, became a remote and forgotten relic. Its stones were no longer protected by their sacred purpose, but seen as a convenient resource for newer settlements elsewhere. This hydrological perspective frames the entire story within a larger, more powerful narrative. The lost labyrinth stands as a testament not only to spiritual belief and political power, but to a civilization's profound dialogue with its environment. It reminds us that Egypt's most enduring wonders were always a fusion of faith and engineering, prayers carved in stone and answered by the disciplined flow of water. A colossal structure does not vanish without leaving a single trace. The labyrinth's physical form may be lost, but its substance, the very stone it was built from, could be sitting in plain sight. Scattered across the world, in museum galleries and storage rooms, lie silent fragments that might once have been part of Amenemhat's grand design. The challenge is that a block of limestone or a statue of a crocodile god does not come with a label stating its original home. Without that definitive inscription, these artifacts are orphans of history, pieces of a puzzle whose final image we can only guess at. The search for them is a quiet, meticulous detective game, played not in the desert sun but in the hushed halls of institutions like the Egyptian Museum in Cairo or the Petrie Museum in London. Researchers examine stone blocks, looking for specific quarry marks known to be used in the Fayyum region during the Middle Kingdom. They analyze the style of carving on a broken column fragment, comparing its proportions and motifs to other confirmed works from Amenemhat's reign. A statue of the pharaoh himself, with his distinct Soma features found in the vicinity of Hawara, almost certainly came from his mortuary complex. Yet, was it from the Pyramid Temple or the legendary labyrinth beside it? The line is impossibly blurred. These potential fragments are whispers from the lost whole. A granite block reused in a Roman wall in a nearby city might have once been a lintel in a sacred corridor. A finely carved relief of the god Sobek could have gazed out from a shrine within the labyrinth's walls. Each one is a physical clue, but a clue waiting for its context. This scholarly pursuit is a testament to patience, connecting dots across continents and centuries, hoping that one day a single artifact will be found with an inscription that finally says, "From the house of millions of years," or "From the great temple of the lake," providing the key that turns speculation into certainty. Until that moment, these scattered stones remain dignified but silent witnesses, reminding us that even the most thorough erasure can never reclaim every last splinter. The threads of this story weave a pattern far beyond the Nile. Centuries after Amenemhat stones were laid, a powerful myth took hold across the Aegean Sea on the island of Crete. Here, Greek legend spoke of a terrifying hybrid, the Minotaur, imprisoned at the heart of a vast, inescapable maze built by the cunning inventor Daedalus. The name for this structure was the Labyrinth. This coincidence of names and concepts is too provocative to ignore. Could these two labyrinths, separated by sea and centuries, be distant cultural cousins? The word itself offers a clue. Labyrinth may derive from labris, the Minoan term for the ceremonial double axe, a symbol of power found carved into the pillars of the palace of Knossos on Crete. This suggests a purely local origin for the name, yet the conceptual echo is profound. Both were described as impossibly complex, man-made structures designed to contain and confuse, to guard a sacred or monstrous central secret. The timelines make a direct connection tantalizing. The Egyptian labyrinth was already ancient by the height of Minoan civilization. The Mediterranean was a highway of trade, with Egyptian artifacts reaching Crete and Aegean goods appearing in Egypt. It is entirely plausible that Minoan or early Mycenaean Greek merchants, diplomats or craftsmen journeyed to the Fayyum. Standing before the staggering scale of Amenemhat's complex, a structure with countless rooms and winding ritual passages, they would have witnessed something utterly outside their experience. Returning home, how would they describe it? They might speak of a house of endless corridors, a stone puzzle built for a king who became a god. Over generations, as the story traveled by word of mouth, the specifics would blur and transform. The overwhelming awe remained, but the context shifted to fit a new cultural landscape. The deified pharaoh, remote and powerful, could morph into a more visceral symbol of chaos, a monstrous half-bull, half-man. The ritual passages meant for a solar journey could become a trap for heroes. The administrative and religious center could simplify into a single, terrifying maze. This is not to say the Greeks copied the myth directly from Egypt. Mythology is never that simple. It is instead a compelling case study in how monumental ideas can migrate and mutate. A real place of overwhelming scale, heard of in travelers' tales, can provide the raw, inspirational clay from which a culture shapes its own foundational stories. The details change, but the core feeling of awe in the face of immense, incomprehensible human achievement remains intact. If there is even a fragment of truth in this speculative link, the legacy of the lost labyrinth expands exponentially. It would mean that Amenemhat's monument did not just vanish from the desert, it embarked on a second life in the realm of story. Its stones may have been quarried, but its shadow stretched across the sea to fuel one of the most enduring narratives of the Western imagination. In this way, the labyrinth truly achieved a form of immortality, its essence preserved not in granite, but in the timeless language of myth. These questions form the modern labyrinth we must now navigate. The first and most fundamental mystery is its location. While the foundation at Hawara is our strongest clue, the possibility remains that we are diligently studying the wrong footprint. Could the true site lie buried under the modern fields of the Fayyum, or was it an amalgam of several great temples that classical travelers combined into a single legend? Without a definitive inscription naming the place, this geographic uncertainty lingers like a mirage. Next, we confront the question of scale. The number 3,000 rooms is almost certainly symbolic, a poetic way to express uncountable grandeur. But what was the real, measurable size of the complex? Was it a single sprawling edifice, or a cluster of interconnected buildings that created the illusion of an endless maze? Translating awe into architectural blueprints is a challenge that has stumped us for centuries. The third mystery delves into its purpose. We see likely fragments of a grand design, a place for royal worship, regional governance, and cosmic symbolism. Yet the exact balance of these functions is elusive. How many chambers were dedicated solely to the cult of Sobek? How many housed scribes tallying grain shipments? And how many formed the ritual path for the sun god's nightly voyage? The labyrinth was likely all these things, but the precise recipe for this sacred and secular fusion is lost. Then there is the slow tragedy of its fate. We know it was dismantled for its stone, but the timeline of this erasure is vague. When exactly did the plundering begin? Was it a gradual process over 1,000 years, or did a specific event, like a major earthquake or a shift in political power, accelerate its decline? Piecing together this chronology is like dating a silence. The fifth and perhaps most tantalizing question is one of survival. Do any sealed chambers, any lower courses of wall, any hidden archives remain intact beneath the water table? The geophysical hints suggest something is down there, but its state of preservation is a profound unknown. Is it a jumble of collapsed rubble, or could we find a sealed portal to a forgotten hall? Finally, we must trace the journey of its legend. How did the story travel from the shores of Lake Moeris to the mosaics of Rome and the myths of Crete? Which travelers, which texts carried the tale and allowed it to transform into a universal symbol? Each of these unanswered questions is not a dead end, but an open corridor. They represent the active frontiers of history, archaeology, and even human imagination. The enduring power of the lost labyrinth lies precisely in this elegant incompleteness, a puzzle that generously offers not a single solution, but a multitude of paths for wonder to follow. Our journey ends where it began, not with an answer, but with a deeper appreciation for the question itself. We have walked alongside ancient travelers, traced the lines of a vanished foundation, and listened to the whispers of technology probing the dark. The lost labyrinth, in its elusive entirety, refuses to be pinned down to a single truth. It was a sacred engine for the afterlife, a stone archive for a kingdom, and a hydrological masterpiece all at once. Its genius lay in that magnificent convergence, a place where the spiritual and the practical were not separate paths, but intertwined corridors in the same grand design. The very fact of its disappearance, that slow subtraction by time and utility, became woven into its power, transforming a physical ruin into an immortal idea. This is the final gift of the labyrinth. It teaches us that legacy is not a matter of permanence, but of resonance. The most enduring wonders are those that continue to speak to us, not from a pedestal, but from a silence we feel compelled to fill. They live on in the stories we tell, the symbols we adopt, and the relentless human drive to seek understanding in the dust. So the next time you encounter a winding path, a complex problem, or a fragment of a forgotten tale, remember the labyrinth of Amenemhat III. Remember that some of history's most profound lessons come not from what was left for us to see, but from what was lost, inviting us to look closer, think deeper, and never stop wondering about the incredible world that came before. If this exploration of one of history's great enigmas has sparked your curiosity, we would love to hear your thoughts. Share your own theories in the comments, and subscribe to join us as we continue to unravel the mysteries waiting just beneath the surface of time.